My daughter-in-law was sitting like this, her face covered with her veil. It was a white veil. A piece of the bomb had hit her head, and she had fallen. We took her out.
The wedding ceremony was for this girl. The next night was supposed to be her wedding ceremony, but they were martyred. Depiction of the occupation. Logar Province, Barki Barak District, Sajawan Village. Solar year 1391/2012 AD. The wedding where the bride became a guest of the grave. Logar Province is a land known for bravery and heroism, a place whose name is often remembered for war, yet the real stories of people's lives are often overlooked. This province represents mountains, farmlands, mud brick houses, and a simple way of life. Life here moves with the changing seasons. People are busy with farming, livestock and daily chores, while joy and sorrow are intertwined. Like other parts of Afghanistan, Logar carries stories of many atrocities and untold tragedies committed by invaders during the 20 years of occupation. To document these crimes and record voices that have never been heard, we are traveling to Barki Barak District in Logar Province, crossing from the provincial center, Pulialam. We enter Barki Barak District. Barki Barak. Signs of the invaders' crimes are visible there as well. But our focus is on a remote village in the district called Sajawan. Lies to the southwest of Barki Barak, with mud-built houses and beautiful valleys. It takes about 40 minutes along a rough road to reach Sajawan. In Sajawan, we first head toward the home of Abdul Qayyum Akhundzada, the house where, in the month of Jawza in 1391-2012, preparations were underway for his daughter's wedding. But before the ceremony could begin, the entire family was martyred. Abdul Qayyum Akhundzada lived in the house with his only brother. According to the villagers, Abdul Qayyum and his brother Abdul Basir led a very modest life. Preparations had been made in this house for the wedding of Abdul Basir's daughter.
It was like this, sir. There were two brothers. One was Abdul Basir Akhundzada, and the other was Abdul Qayyum Akhundzada. They had separate rooms, but lived in the same compound. We are their cousins. In those days, one of their daughters was given in marriage to Muhammad Nabi. The wedding program was arranged, and relatives had come. The wedding ceremonies were going on, and after 2 or 3 days, the main wedding was supposed to begin at around 11 at night. They had a dog tied up there. The dog started barking continuously, and during the barking there was a gunshot, like from a pistol. I was upstairs in the house. The dog ran off because its chain had come loose and reached the place where a vehicle was parked. The sound came from there. Then there was a loud explosion. Boom, boom. The guest room was tall. It was struck as if by an aircraft, or it was hit by a rocket. We were inside. Dust and debris filled the air, and the dust settled on our house. We couldn't come out because planes were circling overhead. We keep livestock, cows, goats, and sheep. They would not stay calm in the stable or house. Understood. Finally, until around 1 or 1:30 at night, the explosions continued from that side. Planes were firing. And from this side too. Others were circling above. We didn't understand what was happening. When it became close to dawn, they left. The Americans were leaving. I came out of the house. There was no one else nearby. I ran. The gate, one side of it had fallen, the other was still standing. When I entered through the gate, there were scattered footprints inside. I went straight to the rooms. I saw holy Qurans that had fallen from the shelf above. There were other books as well. These people were mullahs, poor and humble people.
Young and old were happy. Relatives had gathered near the bride's home. Everyone had come together with the intention of celebrating. It was the beginning of a new life for two couples. This house was not a symbol of war, but a small island of peace, a place where people hoped to escape fear and anxiety for a few hours. But one bloody night changed everything.
Morning came. Our area has around 1,000 houses. All of these households, young and old, came out. The entire surroundings were filled with people. Everyone brought shovels. The martyrs were buried under the earth, and debris, the walls had collapsed on top of them. Parts of the structure had fallen over them. Only 2 people were found alive under the rubble. Large clods of earth had fallen on them, but God had not taken their lives. All the others were gone. There were very small children. Their chests and bodies were crushed down. Some people from our area of Logar gathered and carried the bodies to the provincial center. When people there saw them, they said, "By God, whether they were men or women," and they cried for those children. One of them was that man's sister. She was married in Karwar, name of the area, and had come here for the wedding. Her son was with her. Both of them were martyred here. One was that man's daughter-in-law. It was her wedding. She was martyred here. The wedding ended with her death. Another was that man's brother's wife, who had 3, 4, or 5 children. She too was martyred here. All of them were martyred here.
I had given Akhundzada Sahib's daughter to my son in marriage. After about a year or a year and a half, it was agreed that we would hold the wedding ceremony. They said the wedding would now take place. So I informed my son to come. We had prepared everything for the wedding, all the necessary items, clothing and other things. My son was in Iran, and I was planning to call him back, but then this incident happened at the hands of the Americans. Because of this event, all our plans and ability to hold my son's wedding came to an end. Everything remained unfinished. When I arrived here, a lot of people had gathered. I put on my vest and shawl and began asking, "Where is my daughter-in-law?" Then I slowly started searching. My daughter-in-law was sitting there. Her scarf had been pulled down, her face covered, and she was just sitting like that. It was a white bump. Then the piece that the bomb fragment had hit. We pulled it out from this place. My heart couldn't bear it, and a wave of weakness came over me. I couldn't sleep and felt completely drained. There was another woman there, Akhundzada Sahib's sister. A small boy was clinging to her chest. He was about 5 or 6 years old. We pulled him out as well. One.
There were no weapons in this house, no military personnel, and no activity that would make this place part of a conflict zone. It was a civilian home, filled with civilians who, by the standards of humanity, should have been protected. At 11 p.m., without any ongoing fighting in the area, U.S. military jet aircraft appeared in the sky above the village.
The debris had fallen in such a way that boys and women were all lying underneath. Mullah Abdul Qayyum, the brother of Abdul Basir, was there. There was a tandoor, oven, room, and then there was a quiet corner, perhaps a storage or hidden place. It took until around 1 o'clock before people could reach the scene. There was a child held in his mother's arms who had been martyred. She had clutched him tightly to her chest. Another woman, the sister of that man, had come from Karwar district. That woman was martyred here. Her mother is also buried among the martyrs. She had carried the child with her. The scene was so tragic that it deeply affected us. By God, even in our house, the women and children were too terrified to leave after sunset, without any lamp. Ever since that day, our hearts remain heavy. On that day, my heart did not burst, and perhaps it never will. For the rest of my life, I did not eat for 1.5 nights and days.
These plains were not unfamiliar to the villagers. as they had heard the sounds of aircraft many times during the years of war, but no one expected that a wedding house would become a target in just a few moments. Everything changed.
There were many guests, but no one remained. They said that only a few things were happening here and there. These were excuses. No one else was in the house besides the people connected to the wedding and the guests. Some of the wounded were taken away. A few of the injured girls were carried back and recovered. No one else remained. My own children had also gone there and stayed until the evening prayer. I said I would also go, and they returned. I told them, I am also going now. Why did you come back? They said, you were not allowed to stay overnight. We must leave by morning. The wedding night was the next night, but the guests had already gathered with their relatives. Such cruelty was done. Small children were martyred. My nieces were among them, very small. Even breastfeeding babies were martyred. Their blood mixed with milk as it flowed from their mouths. We buried 13 bodies here. 4 other guests were also martyred. 2 of them were young girls, and a couple of other children were with them. They were taken to Karwar, and from Karwar, I swear to God, their grave is left there. This is the grave of the woman who stayed behind here.
The house, once a symbol of joy, became the target of bombing, and the sounds of life were silenced there forever in this attack. The bride, her family members, and the guests who had come for the wedding were all martyred.
This was my niece-in-law, the wife of my nephew. Her mother was still alive. At first, the Americans came onto the roof. My nephew, Abdul Sabah Akhundzada, reached the roof and saw what was happening. The light there made it clear. They told us these were soldiers. When he reached them, they opened fire on him. He was shot there. My daughter-in-law screamed. I was already brotherless, and now I have become fatherless.
The incident was so sudden that people had no chance to save themselves. A baby, nursing in its mother's arms, was martyred alongside her.
This was the household of Abdul Qayyum Akhundzada, my brother-in-law. They were close sisters. Then the coalition forces started bombing here. Nearly one of the women in our family, my sister-in-law, was martyred. 2 others were also martyred. One was my nephew. 4 people from our household were martyred here. Many others were also martyred, including those who had come for the wedding. All of them were martyred. Our small child was in the mother's arms, clutched to her chest. They were all martyred and buried under the debris. The carpet had been lifted above them. We removed the carpet, but they had already been martyred. Only Allah was seen at that time, and even now. Remembering those events makes our hearts heavy. All the people who came to the martyrs were in a state of shock. No one could even move when they saw the small children. Everyone became completely distraught. They were overwhelmed. They could not do anything in that state.
This was not merely the destruction of a house, it was the end of human lives. The victims of this attack were not just numbers. They were children who had not yet learned the meaning of life, women of their homes, who were the pillars of the house, and elderly people who carried the history of the village with them.
The wedding night was not that night. The wedding night was the next night. 2 of my sisters, one had a wedding in this house and another in a lower part of the area, came here from our household. 2 sisters, one of them with her children, were martyred. Another sister from our household, also in this house, was hit by the bombing on Abdul Qayyum Akhundzada's household. They had approximately 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son, along with my sister, making 9 people who were martyred. Even our livestock, a camel, was killed. Abdul Qayyum Akhundzada's first grave is from that head.
After the incident, the villagers gathered among the ruins, crying as they retrieved the remains of their loved ones from the debris.
Abdul Sabah Akhundzada and Abdul Qayyum Akhundzada were my cousins. One of my sisters had a wedding in Karwar. and then she came from Karwar to my home. She stayed with us for 2 nights. On the 3rd night, my cousins Abdul Baser Akhundzada came there. My guests were already in the house, along with other visitors. My sister came with them, and my nephew was also with us when they arrived. I was not home. When I returned, I asked about my sister. They told me Abdul Baser Akhundzada had taken her, along with other guests. Then the raid started. Planes came, bombing the area. No one could leave the house. I also could not go outside. When I arrived at the site in the morning, after the night, it was impossible to know who had been martyred. Dust covered everyone, and the roofs had collapsed. I realized that first my cousin, Abdul Baser Akhundzada, had been shot. I know this from the wounded who survived. When I saw my sister, her clothes were all torn and bloodied. I saw her wounds. I could not recognize myself. I felt completely overwhelmed. I was in shock. Everything was in chaos, completely different from anything I had seen before.
A wedding is one of the most important moments in a person's life, and its sweet memories are a source of hope for the future. But for a groom whose bride was martyred by the occupying forces, this became one of the hardest memories of his life.
My own household, my wife, came with me. Dust covered everything. I had arranged my son's wedding, and this is what happened. Instead, my son learned of this incident while he was in Iran. He could not do anything from there. He came here, and here he cried. He had come to marry, but this is what happened.
Their questions to the world were simple yet profound. Why was their home targeted? What crime had they committed? Which is grounded in the Geneva Conventions, civilians must be protected from direct attacks during armed conflict. These laws emphasize that military forces must respect the principles of distinction, proportionality, and military necessity. Civilians and civilian property must not be targeted in attacks, and if they are, it is considered a violation of international law. In the case of the Sajawand wedding, the question still remains. On what legal basis was this strike carried out? This shows that the Western world often creates symbolic legal frameworks under various names solely to serve its own sinister purposes, and these frameworks never truly investigate the atrocities and crimes committed by Western forces in Afghanistan or the wider Islamic world. This documentary was not made to spread hatred, nor is it a call for revenge. It was created to reveal the truth and to expose the occupiers' false sympathies. In this documentary, we have recorded voices that have never been heard before, and we have raised questions that have remained unanswered for years. Some weddings are remembered through photographs, videos, and celebrations, but the Sajawand wedding was recorded in graves. This is a truth that cannot be forgotten or erased from history. This wedding is not only the grief of one family, it represents the unspoken pain of an entire nation.